Hello. Before I start reading chapter 6, I want to go back chapter 5 and just add a couple of more paragraphs. During our first 2 years in Africa, which was our first term, Billy had been sick with malaria at least 5 times. We all took the medicine to keep us from getting it, but the meds didn't seem to help Billy at all. Each time he was sick, he spent many days in bed with a high fever, pains all over, and stomach issues. The children and I had it a few times, but never as serious as Billy. But sometime during our furlough, God healed Billy. Over the next 30 years, he would have 2 very mild cases that were not even bad enough to cause him to spend time in bed. He had simply told the Lord that if he wanted us to return to Africa for another term, he would have to heal him. And so he did. He never really suffered from malaria again. During that time, I also had become very ill, but it was not from malaria. I will tell you about my sickness in the next chapter. But in July 1990, the children returned from boarding school, and we made plans to return to America for our first furlough. And so now I will start chapter 6. Our first furlough. Back in Texas, it was spent in a gorgeous home. It was provided to us by friends of ours, Noel and Debbie Pierce. It was their home, but they took only their clothes and their personal things, and they moved out and allowed us to live there for 1 year. It was truly a blessing. Billy traveled all over North Texas to visit the churches that supported us, while I stayed home most of the time to put the children in school and get them settled in our old home church in Saginaw. We lived just down the street from my sister Wanda and her husband Tolly. Billy's parents lived about 5 miles away. When we left Africa, we had flown straight to Birmingham, Alabama, instead of DFW. I wanted to see my mother and my sisters because it would be the first time to see them since my father passed away. After a couple of weeks, though, we flew on to Texas. Before leaving Africa and since arriving in Texas, I had been suffering greatly with advanced periodontal disease. We did not have a dentist in Kisangani, or at least one that I would allow to work on me. So I was convinced that my life as a missionary was probably over. My teeth had moved and shifted so much, and the 2 front teeth protruded outward so far I could not close my mouth or even bring my lips together. I might add that I was afraid of a dentist as if it was the devil himself. Before leaving for the field, I had felt this problem coming on, and so I had went to several dentists and had a very bad experience with each one. One dentist had looked into my mouth and told me he could not help me. I was convinced there was nothing that could be done. I looked like a freak, and I could never walk out of the house again. This all came to a head one day when I heard Billy talking on the telephone to Brother Durwood Dubose, who was the assistant superintendent of the North Texas district and also our missions director while we were home on furlough. He was making plans to meet with him, have lunch, and talk about our first term in Africa. I ran to the bedroom and I grabbed the extension telephone and I started to cry, saying, "Oh, Brother D, I cannot continue being a missionary because I have something terribly wrong with my mouth and my teeth." Without any hesitation, he said, "Now, Joe, everything is going to be okay. I know a dentist, a very good friend of mine, and a very good dentist. He will take care of you, and I know that we can fix this." I said, "Oh, no, you don't understand. It's too bad, and there's nothing that can be done. And I'm too afraid to go back to a dentist." Then he said to me, with so much love coming through that telephone, "Yes, something can be done, and I know that Dr. Clark can help you. To prove what I'm saying, I will not only call him myself and set up the appointment, but I will go with you." And then he prayed that God would give me the courage to walk out the door and face the world and all my fears. Brother D did just as he said he would, and he went with us the next day to see Dr. Clark for the very first time. He held my hand and quoted scriptures to me as we sat in the waiting room. I don't believe there's another assistant superintendent in the world as kind and caring as he was for me. Maybe it was because he saw how desperate I was and in need of help, as I had lost all confidence in myself. I was thinking my life was over, not because I had so much pride in the way I looked, but I felt that it was as bad as cancer and would soon take my life. Dr. Clark worked a miracle on my mouth. And the first thing he did, after reassuring me I would feel no pain, he pulled my 2 front teeth. He had us to come back later that afternoon, and he inserted 2 artificial teeth in their place. We had sent Brother D back home, and when I got home that afternoon, I called him and said, "Brother D, this is Joe, and I am beautiful." I never see Brother D now that he doesn't say to me, "Hello, beautiful," and that was over 30 years ago. I have to say also that I would never have made it through that awful time in my life. It was actually 6 months of dental work without Billy. When I was at my worst, ugly as homemade sin, as my mother would say, he always told me how beautiful I was, and he calls me that to this day. It rubbed off on Jason, and he calls me beautiful each time we talk. Am I that beautiful? No, but I can smile and talk without covering my mouth, and the 2 men in my life that call me beautiful make me feel beautiful by calling me that. The rest of that furlough, that first furlough, was spent returning to the dentist frequently until he was able to bring good health back to my mouth and get rid of all the infections. God was so good to touch and heal me and Billy, and by the time our year furlough was over, we were both very ready and willing to return back to Africa where God had called us.